Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Ollie and welcome to the 9th tutorial in this series of Java for Beginners. In this tutorial we're going to be going over something called arrays. Now first of all, what is an array? Well, going back to my original Matchbox analogy when we first learned about variables, we can keep that in mind and take a look at this awesome picture I've drawn in Paint. So basically what I've done is I've attempted to show the Matchbox analogy in the context of arrays. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think, boxes all strapped together, and there is simply one label over them. I've got names of workers, and then each of these matchboxes are still individual, so we can slide out the individual ones and see that they can hold whatever values we want. But the main point to take away from this is that many values have simply one label, and we can access each of these in turn by referencing this and then simply an index. So let's move my camera up like so, and let's get started with arrays. So first of all, how do we declare an array? What is the syntax? Well, let's say I do the example that I just showed you in the picture. If I have a string array called names of workers, like so, and I'll just end it with a semicolon. At the moment this is an individual string, but how do we turn it into an array? Well, the easiest way to do this is in front of the variable type when we declare it, we're simply going to do these two square brackets like so, and that's going to declare an array. This names of workers is now an array, and it can store more than one value, and the easiest way to store values is to put equals, and then we can put these two spiked brackets like we do for methods and classes, like so, and we can now begin to insert comma separated values. So I can do Bill, Bob, Ollie, Jade, and etc, etc. So now this names of workers array now holds four values. We have Bill, Bob, Ollie, and Jade. So let's, for example, print one of them out. System.out.println, and the way we reference them is by calling the name of the array, so names of workers, like so, and then we use the square brackets around the end of it, and then inside we simply put the number of the index of these that we want to access. So let's do Bill, we'll put the number 1. So I'll drag this up here and hit run. But as you can see, it didn't actually print out the value of Bill. Why is that? Because we put in the number of 1, and surely this is the first one. Well, in Java, it's very important to remember that array indexing begins at 0. So the reason it's printing out Bob is because Bill is the 0th one in the list, then Bob is the first, Ollie is the second, Jade is the third. So if I stick in 0 into this array, then you can see it will print out Bill, like so. So that's a very important thing to remember. If you forget this rule and say you try to access Jade with the number 4 and hit run, you'll see that we get an error, an array index out of bounds. That's because this isn't the 4th one in the list, it's the 3rd one, because we have the 0th, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, like so. If you try and access an element that doesn't exist in the array, you will get this error here, this array index out of bounds exception, and it'll tell you which one you're trying to access that doesn't similarly to trying to access ones that don't exist. Also, if you try and access a negative one, like put -4 or -1 or whatever, you will also get that same error because you can't have a negative So with this in mind, let's think about different ways that we can initialize this. So I'm going to keep this here, and I'll put it on 0 so we can have Bill. So the only way that we can initialize an array in this fashion, by doing the comma separated values, is at the place of declaration, like so. If we wanted to assign values at elsewhere, for example, say if we didn't know the amount of names we needed to add, we can initialize the array to a set number, and then we can give them values elsewhere. So let's delete this thing that we have here. Instead of saying names of workers, we can set this equal to a new string array, like so. And you can read this as when you declare arrays, you can read this as a string, and then that is array, so new string array. And the reason it's red is because we need to give it a value, because arrays always have a set amount of elements in them, you can't change it later on. So we need to give it a value. I think we had 4. So we can put the number 4 in, and it's important not to get confused. If we want 4 elements, we don't put the number 3 in, because I know it's confusing to think about the indexing starting at 0, but when we're declaring the amount of variables we want, we actually put the amount we want, so 4. So in this case, 4 elements, then we'll have the 0th, the 1st, the 2nd, and 3rd. So now that we want to assign values to it, it's as easy as simply calling the name of the variable, names of workers, and then accessing it much like we did here. So we can put the number 0, we can simply set this equal to whatever name we want, like so. And then we can copy this line down, and then we can set the first, 0, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and then just give them different values. Damn. When I can learn to spell. There we go. Alright, so we've got 4 different values. I can just hit run and show you. You see that the first one we print out is Ollie, because we're accessing the 0th one, and that's the one we assign it to. In some ways it's easier to lay it out like this, so we can simply match the numbers up with when we initialize them. It's less confusing than the original way we did it. So that's pretty much it for the ways you can declare an array and the different ways we can assign values. I'm also going to show you how we can use variables that the array automatically has. So we'll go over this a bit later in a later tutorial, but an array is actually an object, and that means it has variables we can use. So we can write names of workers, there we go, and then we can say, not the square brackets, we can put a dot, and then these are all the variables that these are all the methods we can use, sorry. A lot of these you won't understand or recognize. We go over that at a later date. The only one I wanted to show you about was this length one here, so we can do the length. And that is basically the length of the array. In this case, well, that's not a statement, but in this case, the value of length is 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 different elements. It's the way we originally initialized it. So I'll remove that quickly. So with our names of workers array initialized, we've got 4 values in it. Let's make a program. So we have int x equal to 0, there we go. And using our knowledge of the while loop that we used last tutorial, we can say while x is less than 4, we're going to make sure we increment x here before I forget. And we're going to say system.out.println, and we're going to call names of workers, and then as the value we want to print out, we're going to do x. And what that's going to do is, it's going to, while x is less than 4, so it's, in other words, it's going to iterate it 0, 1, 2, and 3, it's going to print out the names of the workers at each iteration. So this is basically an automatic way of printing out all the values of the workers. If I hit run, you'll see that it prints them all out. And now finally, using the length variable, we're going to add a final little thing to our program. We're going to say system.out.println. We're going to say there are, and then print out the names of workers.length. So there are however many workers, and their names are, and then we print out all the names of the workers. So using the variables that the array has that we know about, and using our knowledge of the while loop, we're gonna automatically iterate through all of the names and print them out to the screen. So you can see there are 4 workers and their names are Ollie, Alex, Matt, Chloe. So you can experiment with that. For example, change this to say 10, add more names. You don't even need to do this. We can do it the original way that we did with the 2 brackets, like so. But just experiment around with that. It's definitely the best way to learn. And this while loop is a little bit of a manual way to do it. It's a little bit, let's say, more effort than we need to. In the next tutorial, I'll be showing you how we can do this process here a lot easier. But in this tutorial, we learned about arrays, how we could give values to the different elements in the array, and also some of the variables that the array has. So in the next tutorial, we're going to be going over something called the for loop. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.